Sitting there, Jackson felt an overwhelming sense of uncertainty clawing at him. At first, when his daughter began acting strangely, he brushed it off. But upon discovering that letter, he realized immediate action was necessary. This situation surpassed his comprehension. Involving the police was imperative. What lurked in his backyard, he wondered? Jackson had a great life with a good job, a lovely wife, 2 wonderful kids, and the perfect house. But little did he know, there was a problem with their house's backyard. Secrets from its past were hidden there, and it was his daughter Ellie who found them. Ever since Ellie turned 6, she acted oddly. She had a routine, but now she did something new that worried her dad. She talked to the fence like someone was there, asking her questions. At first, Jackson thought it was just her playing, but he realized it was more. Ellie did it every day, making Jackson suspicious. He knew there was more going on than he could see. After observing her for a few days, Jackson realized this incident happened at exactly the same time every day. Whether Ellie was inside or outside, she would approach the fence at exactly 4:30 p.m. Did that mean something? Was there any significance to that specific time, or was her father just imagining things? At that point, his daughter's behavior had gotten Jackson's full attention. He was intrigued by what he was seeing, and his intrigue quickly turned into a puzzle that he wanted to solve. So he spent every day watching Ellie. He stayed away so she wouldn't pick up on it, but there was something about to happen that would force him to act. After a few days, Jackson started wondering who it was his daughter was talking to. Was it a dog or a cat? Was it simply their next-door neighbor? He couldn't say for sure, as he was never actually hearing the discussions. But that was about to change. He wanted to know what was being said and who was saying it. With that thought in mind, Jackson decided to test the waters. One afternoon, while his daughter was pouring her heart out to her newfound friend, he approached. He could hear his daughter chatting up a storm as she sat on the grass facing the fence. But that wasn't what confused her father. It was the response that really got to him. Jackson waited for a while, but he didn't hear anyone responding to young Ellie. There was no neighbor keeping the discussion going, no excited dog barking in response, and no cat to give her an answer. Confused, her father looked over the fence, but what he saw left him even more confused than before. There was absolutely no sign of any creature on the other side of the fence. His daughter wasn't speaking to anyone at all, or was she? Jackson considered that his daughter might have an imaginary friend. It was common for children around her age and would explain her strange behavior. If only he knew how wrong he was. As the days passed, the situation started bugging Jackson. His son had an imaginary friend when he was Ellie's age, but he spoke about him all the time and even had him over for dinner. Why wasn't Ellie doing that? Why didn't she tell their parents that she'd made a new friend? Was there even more to this situation? Was Jackson missing something? Jackson found himself constantly thinking about what it was that his daughter was doing. He was questioning every word that left her mouth when she was outside, and before long, he was questioning everything she did. He knew that he needed to do something about this, but what was the right way to approach the matter? That night, Jackson thought about everything he'd seen and heard. He knew he needed to come up with a plan, but he was still unsure of what was actually happening. Before he could find a solution, he needed to find an answer. Was this as innocent as it seemed, or was there more to this situation? By the time he woke up the next morning, Jackson was armed with a plan. He could get all the information he needed if he invested money in some cameras and installed them in the right positions. So that was exactly what he planned on doing. He'd do it overnight so no one could see what he was really up to. Jackson spent that day going from store to store, looking for the best deals he could find. Before long, he was ready to go. Armed with his tools, he waited for nightfall. Once his daughter was asleep, he crept outside and installed the cameras where he thought he'd get the best views. What would he see? Jackson tried to calm his nerves for the next few days, knowing that he would have the answers sooner rather than later. He wanted to collect enough footage before he looked, and no one could blame him for that. But when the big day finally came, he was more confused than ever before. Jackson looked at the footage, and he couldn't explain what he saw. Jackson spent hours going through the footage of his daughter's discussion, but he found absolutely nothing. There was nothing there for her to talk to. That was when the father knew something was seriously wrong. Something was happening in his backyard, and he needed to find out what. What would he ultimately discover? Jackson spent countless hours wondering what it was his daughter was up to. Who was she talking to and why? Why didn't the cameras capture anything? His mind was filled with questions that he didn't have the answers to, and it was starting to drive him mad. Would he ever uncover the truth, or was he just wasting time on figments of his daughter's imagination? At this point, months had passed. Jackson had reached the point of no return, and his mind was filled with worrisome thoughts. He'd done extensive research into imaginary friends and now knew that his daughter's behavior didn't fit the description. There had to be something else, but what was it? What was going on in his backyard? Jackson couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. He needed answers. He needed to know who his daughter was talking to and why. He couldn't let this madness continue anymore. Jackson had to get to the bottom of this before it was too late. What if his daughter was in danger and he didn't see it? In Jackson's mind, there was something sinister going on behind closed doors. He had discovered that no one lived in the house next door, and it was a playground for criminals. Was one of those criminals targeting his daughter? Was she talking to one of them? The thought sent a chill down his spine, but it was a possibility he couldn't ignore. Jackson couldn't get the thought out of his mind. He was sure one of the syndicates had been trying to get their claws into his daughter, and he couldn't allow that. He was more determined to solve this puzzle than ever before. But what could he do? Should he call the police, or should he stop his daughter from going outside? All Jackson knew at that point in time was that he couldn't let any harm come to his daughter. She was the most precious thing on the planet. He couldn't let anyone take her away from her family. A knot formed in his stomach as he tried to come up with a plan, but there was only one thing he could think of to help her. In order to keep his daughter safe, Jackson forbade her from going outside. She kicked and screamed in protest, but this time he wouldn't back down. The only time his daughter would be allowed in the backyard again was when he was 100% sure that no harm would come to her. Would that work? Jackson kept watching the footage, hoping that he would find evidence to prove that he was right about the syndicates, but he saw absolutely no movement next door. No one had gone into or left that house in days. Was it because they saw his camera, or was his mind getting the better of him? Was he the one with an imaginary friend, or in this case, a predator? For many nights, Jackson couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about why his daughter was acting strangely, but he couldn't figure it out. Then, one morning, he had an idea. He decided to watch the videos he had recorded before. Suddenly, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. It was an important clue he had been searching for. He saw a person's boots and a man wearing a cap in the footage. Jackson was scared and called the police. They investigated and found out that the man was wanted for kidnapping. He was arrested and sent to prison for many years.